Who are we here with?
Julia. Hello, everyone.
Julia, what?
My passport name is Doan, Julia Thuy Linh. So my dad named me Thuy Linh. My mom didn't like the name, and then she named me Julia.
And how long have you been in Vietnam?
So as of this year, I've been in Vietnam for 10 years. I've been here for 10 years, yeah. On and off, like for longer, because before that, I would travel back and forth. So before I permanently moved to Vietnam, I was going forth and back for 2 years.
So how old are you?
I'm 32 this year.
10. So when you're 22, do you remember what was your life like? Where was home first? Let's start with that. Where were you born?
So I was born in Germany, in a tiny town in Germany. Then I moved to a bigger city, which is
Tiny town's name.
it's Hamburg. It's near the French border. And then we moved to Munich when I was 13, and then I went to university in Berlin. So that's where I lived before I moved to Vietnam.
How was your life in Germany? Do you remember from childhood to 22?
I think I had a very chill childhood, like in the movies. Like I lived in a very small, like I lived in the countryside. So I would I don't know, just go to school and then go to the forest, play like in nature. I had a very sheltered childhood in terms of like the environment. And then I remember when I moved to Munich, the biggest city, it's when it started, like I wasn't able to connect so much to like the new environment. And I was always very into like manga and anime. So from a very early age on,
Do you remember which ones were you watching?
everything I could possibly watch. So when I moved to Munich, like the biggest city, I didn't have any friends. That's how I spent most of the time. And it was very clear for me from early age on that I want to move to Asia, that I want to go to Asia. I just want to experience Asia.
Did you feel growing up in Germany? Did you feel German?
I always had this identity crisis where I didn't know exactly how I should feel. So my mom was always like, you're Vietnamese, you have to behave like a Vietnamese person. But at the same time, I would feel like very German because I was growing up with German friends, like German environment, German school system. And the German system would tell me like, oh, you're an independent person, just be whoever you want to be. So I had this huge conflict of like outside home and inside my home, like who am I actually? Like as the older daughter of a Vietnamese household, you have no choice. You have to be Vietnamese. You have to be the big sister. You have to be the good daughter. Like all these things. I wasn't very good at it, to be honest. Like I had a lot of fights with my mom over this. I was very rebellious. But overall, like yeah, you have no choice.
What made you come to Vietnam?
So when I was a teenager already, I decided I want to go to Asia. I want to experience Asia. So when I was 18, I just finished high school. I applied for an internship in Vietnam. I really wanted to try to live here. So my parents let me go for 3 months. I had an internship at Elle magazine in Vietnam because I was doing a fashion blog at that time. And the fashion editor of Elle magazine knew my blog. And yeah, so I did an internship here. I really enjoyed the time here. I loved the fashion community here because everything was so like just energetic. And even though I was very young, people were very welcoming. And that's when I already decided, I was 19, I think like 18, 19. That's when I decided like I want to move here one day. But I came back to Germany and my mom was like, oh, you have to go to university. There's no way you're not going to university. And then I did go to university. And at the same time, I started my online business over there, which is Floralpunk. But most of my customers actually came from Vietnam.
I want to ask you, what is being Vietnamese? Like, what does it mean to you? Like, as during your teenage years?
I think being Vietnamese is, for me, it's home. Like Vietnamese food, the fact that I have to be responsible of taking care of the home, being responsible of taking care of my siblings. So for me, being Vietnamese identifies with family and just home. And in everything like outside of home aspect, I feel more German or Western in that sense. And actually, when I first moved to Vietnam, my Vietnamese was very bad. I was very scared. I got ripped off a lot, you know. Like I had a lot of like accidents. I lost like 2 phones in 1 month. Like all those typical things that your parents warn you about, why they don't want you to move to Vietnam, like whether you're 19 or like 30 something. all that happened to me very early on.
Because like you moved, this was like 10 years ago. So there weren't a lot of like waves of Vietkies or overseas Vietnamese coming here. So I would say like you would be like the first wave. Would you say so?
I think I think like among German Vietnamese, I was one of the first to come here.
And how was your mom's or parents' reaction to be like, I wanna go there, I wanna stay there, not just for a trip? Like, what was their first reaction?
My mom was actually very, very worried. She didn't want me to go, but I'm very stubborn. I've always been very stubborn, very stubborn teenager. I always just feel like I'm gonna do what I want to do, whether she wants it or not. Eventually, she still supported me in a way or another. I mean, I was 22. Like she knew that she has to let go, and I was already living independently at that point. So it's just like, yeah, I'm moving to Vietnam. She's like, no, it's so dangerous. Like all the things that can possibly happen. Like all that like she said all these things, but it wouldn't change my mind. And even until I was living in Vietnam for 6 years, 7 years already, she would still tell me, Con ơi, please come back to Germany. It's safer back in Germany. Even when I like now I have 2 kids, she still tells me like, please come back to Germany. Life in Germany is so much more safe, and school is like free. Education is free. You get so much support from the like welfare system and stuff. Why don't you come back to Germany? And then I'm here. I'm gonna help you to take care of the kids. Like my mom still feels like life in Vietnam is very, how do you call it? It's not so reliable. It's very unstable. So it gives her anxiety. So that's why she's still asking me to come back. Yeah.
From both your parents, who would you say had more influence in your mindset?
Both affected me a lot, actually.
Can you tell us more?
So my mom, obviously being my main caregiver, has like affected me in a lot of ways. I would say what I mean, I didn't have such a good relationship with my mom growing up. It was tough for her being a single mom, raising a teenager by herself. Um, and her mindset being still a little bit more on the traditional Vietnamese side. So we had a lot of conflict through that identity crisis, which I had. I felt like I want to be German, but she wanted me to be more Vietnamese. So we had a lot of fights. So it was very clear for me how I don't want to be like. At the same time, now that I'm a mother myself, I can really feel her influence on me like every single day in the way how I raise my kids. And my dad actually influenced my mindset more in terms of like what success means, like how to be happy.
Tell us more about how did you start the blog that you were known for? Like, how did that come off with? And like, how did you became off camera the girl with depression and like talking about her parents online? Like, how did that come about?
I think I was the sad emo girl as a teenager, so that's why I started the blog. I had no friends, nobody to talk to, and that's how I started the blog. I actually discovered blogging very early. I was 12, and I was actually not influenced by anyone. I just discovered this function, and I always wrote diaries, so I just put it on digital. I thought like it was cool that you can save it somewhere, like on the computer.
And then when did you start seeing momentum in that? Like when you start like, wait, people are reading this.
It was gradually, because just by the fact that I was putting myself out there before other people, there weren't a lot of people, right? And there was like a discovery function. There's always been a discovery function, and people just would randomly like discover my blog posts, and they would read them and then leave comments. I've followers who've been following me like since I was 13.
Being a German Vietkiu blogger, how did you start getting that Vietnamese attention?
So it was actually because I ran a fashion blog. The name was Tough Look Don't Hurt, together with a Vietnamese girl. So she's Vietnamese, and we met in Germany, and we just decided to run a blog together. And she had a follower base in Vietnam already, so that's how people got to know me, through her.
How was the creation of Floralpunk? Like, how did you start? Like, okay, I'm gonna build a blog, and then I'm gonna start creating my own product, because that's not every day. Like, not your typical person blog and then business mindset. I'm gonna create a product to sell to my audience.
That was a long process, I would say. to keep it short, so I had a blog. I had an audience. I always wanted to do something in fashion, but like when you grow up in Germany, like you don't really know how to get into fashion, right? There's only like, oh, you have to study fashion design or fashion journalism or fashion photography. That's like three courses that they offer at university. And I didn't want to do any of these. I just felt like I do want to create content. I want to do something in fashion. I like to curate content. I like to do styling, but there was nothing like really out there that I could study, like in the on the typical path in the Western world that I could do. So after I went to Vietnam, I did the internship at Elle magazine because the salaries in Vietnam were very, very low. But the people working in the fashion industry, they still love luxury products, right? They still want to buy Chanel and Louis Vuitton and all those things. So they had to side hustle. So all of the people in the media company, almost all of them had some side hustle. Like they did freelance jobs as stylists. They would like do some DIY and sell it on like some weekend market. And I was just very inspired by that. I met some people my age, and I was like only 19 at that point, who had their own business. So they just imported products from the market. They would take photos in their own style. Some of them booked me as a model back then because I was a fashion blogger. And yeah, that's how I got in touch with them. I got so inspired. I was like, oh my God, if they can do it, I can do it too. But I didn't start until like 2 years later.
What I'm doing is working. Like, do you remember that first, like your first month of revenue?
My first month, I made 32 euro revenue, which was like three products at that point.
It's like 50 grand USD.
$50, like 32 euro.
Oh, 32 euro? I thought 32,000. Okay.
No, 32 euro. But and then the second month I scaled it up like 10 times to 300 something. But then I remember 6 months later it grew to 3,000 something. And then the reason why I decided to move it to Vietnam was like my first pop-up sale here. Within 3 days, I made, I think like by today's currency, it's $5,000 in 3 days. It just like people just kept coming and buying, you know. And my product was expensive for the Vietnamese taste at that point. It was like $12 earrings.
What was that? That's in VND?
It was like 360K, 420K is expensive. Even for today's standard, it's not cheap. But people just kept coming and buying, and I was like, wow, you know.
So people don't know, like Julia has brick and mortar. So how did you go from pop up to brick and mortars, like actual physical location? Like, was that all in you? Were there investors?
I had like at that time I was working with a friend because he saw the potential in the business and he wanted to join. So we did it together for a while, and he brought in a small investment. That's how we were able to open the first store in Vietnam. And throughout the years, I've worked with different people. Like it's like people come and go to support you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, like for the first store, when we decided to move here, we had a small investment, and we were very lucky to have that. So it made everything easier.
I'm sure it wasn't like I'm gonna be here for 10 years. Like, was your initial like I'm gonna beta test Vietnam for 1 year, and then how did 1 year become a decade?
It just keep going. Like the business just kept growing. And that's the main reason why I stayed here. I just felt like, oh my God, there's so much potential. There's still so many opportunities. And it just never stopped for me, even until today. Even like though like the past 2 years have been tough in terms of business, like opportunities just keep showing up. I keep learning, I keep growing. And that's I don't want to leave. My mom's been asking me like, hey, business been tough. Come back to Germany. I will take care of the kids for you. And I'm like, no, I want to go through this. I want to learn this. I want to suffer through this.
But does the fact of your mom constantly chiming, does that affect you, or did it affect you?
It did affect me before because it makes you feel like she don't trust your abilities. But now I just really understand that she's just so scared. She's so scared. She's so anxious. That's her, you know. She has so much anxiety, and no matter how well I do, I think that's something that she has to resolve. It has nothing to do with me, whether I'm doing well or bad.
What's next for Julia?
I see myself raising my kids here. I still see a lot of opportunities for my business. I want to grow the brand to be like a representing brand for local Vietnamese fashion on just not Southeast Asian scale, maybe international scale even. So I still enjoy working on my brand very much every single day. I love raising kids in Vietnam. It's actually really chill here. The weather is good, except for rainy season.
So, what are your thoughts on putting your kids through the schooling here?
I used to pressure myself so much because of the school fees, because I felt like, oh, I have to send my kids to international school. They have to be in the Western environment. But if I look at myself now, actually, like, I was like putting just so much pressure on myself. Now I just send them to Vietnamese school. Like, they still have English there. They're still gonna learn English at some point. They still learn English now. And I mean, if they want to be Western later on, they can still be Western. They have German citizenship. They can move to Germany anytime. If they're 15, they tell me like, oh, I want to go to grandma's now to learn German because I want to live in Germany. That's fine, you know. And for now, like I took a lot of pressure away from myself by thinking that German education, international education, is better because I feel like the way that your kid's mindset, it actually depends so much more on you.
Do you remember what were some like pivoting or like tough times in Vietnam where you're like, I might need to go back. This is too tough for me.
I actually, honestly speaking, I've never had that.
Really?
I've never had one moment when I felt like I need, I want to give up my life here and move back to Germany. Not once. I know it's a backup option in my head. Like sometimes I think about it, I imagine it, and then I always come back to the conclusion, no, I want to stay here. Like I love living in Vietnam.
As you're spending more time here, do you feel more like connected to not only your parents but who you are the more time you're here?
The longer I'm here, yeah, the more empathy and I have for like everyone I'm working with, my family. Everything starts to make sense more and more. Like all the struggles I've gone through as a teenager, it just resolves itself. Also, the fact that I'm having children on my own and how my parents' parenting influences my parenting. I do understand a lot more of the pain now because they were immigrants. I'm basically an immigrant here. So I'm like a kind of a foreign parent in Vietnam. So for me, it's even easier because I speak the language and I've been here here for so long. How hard it must have been for my parents to just come to Germany, having me right away, like within a year, not speaking the language, not having any like support system, and not having like the financial freedom that I have now. So considering that, just like oh, it must have been so tough for them.
It's like almost same with me, where it's like things come full circle, and you can finally you see them as humans.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that our parents say, it eventually becomes true. It's like just wait till you. There's this one term that my mom's like, just wait till you have a kid, you will understand. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And then it happens.
I will never be a parent like you. You know, that's what you kept thinking. I will never be like that.
And then
And now I'm like, yeah, I'm just like my mom. I mean, there are some things to it that you do differently, but the essence of like the things that you are worried about for your child, the things that you get upset about, like when they paint on the wall and they don't want to eat their food, you still you do get upset, you do get scared about the same things, and then the behavior comes out maybe in similar ways, a little bit less harsh, I would say, but basically the feeling is the same.
so for someone who wants to come here, hasn't been here, what are 3 tips that you would give them?
Find a local friend, have a local friend or like an international friend, like somebody like me who's been here for 10 years, because I keep telling Peter, like, if you have any problems, please tell me. Because sometimes you don't have to go through so much pain and struggle by yourself. Like you can just have a friend who can help you to solve things more easily.
There's a little tangent, but I don't know if I'll include that. Okay, so that was time where I was like, I asked for a dentist, right?
Oh yeah,
And,
sorry,
then
that one was bad.
she's like,
I
okay,
didn't expect
this
that.
dentist is only gonna be like 500, 300K. They speak English, right? So then I show up there. I'm like, okay, Julia has been here.
Yeah.
I go there. They don't speak English. They charge me double.
I really
And
didn't
I was like,
understand that.
okay, but continue. Tip 2.
I'm sorry. I'm really
Tip
sorry
2.
about that. Tip number 2, join Facebook groups. You can get a lot of information like in those Facebook group expert communities. People are very friendly, very helpful. And my third tip would be learn Vietnamese. It makes life so much easier. My Vietnamese was very bad when I first came here. Actually, do connect to Vietnamese language, do connect to Vietnamese culture. It's gonna make you feel, it's gonna easier for you to connect. And at one point, you're gonna be so comfortable that you like, at one point, you're gonna feel like a local. And that makes life here even more enjoyable.
Do you find yourself like having this shift between different hats in terms of culture-wise, where it's like, oh, this person's Vietnamese, so I have to like cater the way I talk, and then oh, this person's German, I can be much more blunt and like to the point. So I just want to say, I think wrap it up. Thank you for Julia for having on my show. She was actually one of the first people that I've met, and yeah,
How long has it been?
it's been that I've been in Vietnam 5 months. It's gonna be 5 months. This next month's gonna be half a year.
Still fresh.
Really, really quick.
How do you feel now? By now, I know like the first time I met him. I know like the first time I met Peter, he was not convinced yet.
About
Like living here, like staying here, you still felt like very like, oh, you could go back anytime.
yeah, but I feel like now it's like I'm only begun, and like I feel like since you see the macro, you saw a lot of potential in me, where it was like coming from the West, like you said, it's like I don't think I can get as big if it wasn't for here, but I'll leave that for the next video. My camera's gonna die.
Okay.
Okay, bye bye.